Over the weekend, as we saw Kwon making his first appearance in the U.S. in federal court, as he now faces 130 years. And again, I don't think he's going to get anything near that, but that is the technical maximum sentence that exists for Kwon. Today's episode is brought to you by Akash Network, the world's premier decentralized compute marketplace. Check out Akash to buy and sell computing resources securely and efficiently. Purpose-built for public utility at akash.network. Hello and welcome everybody to the first show of the new year. Happy New Year. I'm Zach Guzman, the host of Coinage, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios here in New York City. Excited to dig into what has Bitcoin popping back above that key $100,000 level, a hot start to the year, as we're watching not just the crypto markets, but also huge things when it comes to macroeconomics that will be impacting, I think, crypto markets for the beginning part of this year. As Trump comes into office, a lot of volatility expected, but looking to be a hot Q1 in all things crypto. I want to start, as we always do, with a look on the charts right now. And we will bring that chart up in just a second, but hope everyone had a nice New Year's holiday season as we were a bit quiet, but a lot of things to discuss today, not just where Bitcoin's price is at, but also Kwon getting extradited to the U.S. and facing 130 years when it comes to what prosecutors are looking for in that case post-Terra's collapse. It's been about 2 years, obviously a big story for us here at Coinage, and we'll dig into all those details in just a sec. If you're watching this live, feel free to like it and retweet it. Gets more eyeballs on it that way. Always helps us out here at Coinage. And I want to dig into just what we're seeing here in our Crypto Project of the Year series, which we'll bring up as well, because that is now down to, we started with 16 teams, we're down to just 2, ladies and gents. It is now Solana v. Stacks in our big voting, which wrapped up yesterday, or actually this morning, technically, on those teams. Super excited to dig into what we might see from those two projects this year, including perhaps a warning for those looking to ride the Solana wave, as we dig into all of that later on in the show. But as I said, first, we might as well take a look at the charts. I'll bring it up right now for you. There we go. 101. A hot start. And really, if you look at it, all the action really just came in the last few minutes here. We were sitting below 100K. Look at that swing. It's a pretty wild move. Just a casual 2K move to start the morning. Why not? Napalm in the morning, and some of that having to do with, again, a lot of the macro moves we've been seeing. The dollar suffering its worst day. Pretty crazy drop-off since 2023, now 2 years ago, if you want to look at it that way. Welcome to 2025. And I think a lot of that's going to continue. We've noted in the past the moves in the dollar and what that means for Bitcoin, basically swinging off a report from the Washington Post saying that Trump might back off the tariffs. A lot of things to consider here because you don't really know how Congress is going to work, and you don't really know what's going to be top of mind for Trump. So we're going to get answers to those questions as we move along in January. But clearly, as the chart shows, Bitcoin's price is going to be swinging as a lot of that, when it comes to fiscal policy, gets set in 2025. We'll, of course, be tracking all of that for you, as we always do here at Coinage, as we amalgamate. First time I've used that word in 2025, as we amalgamate the top headlines, not just in crypto, but also in TradFi. Want to start, as we always do, with what has become somewhat normal, which is Michael Saylor buying more Bitcoin, because he's back, ladies and gents, with the 9th consecutive weekly purchase at MicroStrategy, as he always does as well, teasing ahead of time to talk about it on Sunday, saying that the Michael Saylor tracker needs more green dots, and he did that again this time, announcing that MicroStrategy has acquired more than 1,000 Bitcoin for a little over $100 million. Now his price on that purchase at $94,000 per Bitcoin. Now, as you can see there, average purchase price just north of 62 grand, acquired for basically 28 billion. So a lot of money in Bitcoin continuing at MicroStrategy. And Texas, if you want to show the chart too, the other one, the Saylor tracker chart, just showing continued purchases. It is kind of somewhat expected now at this point, because the purchases themselves have kind of dwindled But he's maintained his kind of weekly purchase, which if you're an average retail user out there, generally probably the way to go. You buy the dips, you just kind of set it and forget it. You buy weekly if you want to do that. Dollar cost averaging, as it's called. Better way to kind of navigate some of this volatility. I tend to think, sometimes maybe smarter just to see the pullbacks, buy the dips more kind of aggressively when you see them, if you are, again, a long-term investor. And if we have that other chart, it kind of shows how much he had been buying around Christmas time. It was a real noted step-up function. Yep, that's the one in terms of how much MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor have been buying, particularly into year-end. As again, they have this 21-21 plan, 21 billion on equity, 21 billion in debt to scoop up more and more Bitcoin, and things really accelerated into year end and then kind of cooled off. And so I think that tells you something too in terms of MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy. Say that 10 times fast. In the way that he's trying to move faster and slower in some of these purchases. Since we've crossed that 100K level, it's kind of slowed down a bit. So something to keep an eye on. But then again, over the weekend / on Friday, they announced they would be issuing new shares above their traditional shares that are outstanding to, again, buy more Bitcoin in line with what they've already announced. And so in that sense, I don't expect us to see any slowdown in the weekly purchases, though they are likely, I think, to stay at this $100 million level each week, at least until something drastically changes. But that seems to be steady as she goes. And on the fund flow side, this is, again, something we've been watching in terms of it was a weak end to 2024 in inflows for the Bitcoin ETFs, but in general, 4 times as strong in a year as it's ever been for inflows into Bitcoin investment products. It looks a little weak on this chart. Some of you might be scratching your head and saying, wait, if it was a good week, why is it negative there? Or basically nothing to see for the week. Reason being is, as I said, it was weak in the final days of 2024, but when you back up and look at the 3 days to kick off 2025, actually pretty good. $585 million in inflows so far off those 3 days, according to CoinShares. So if you really put that into this chart, you'd again see strength basically back at that halfway to 1 billion. So in general, the rebound there is pretty strong, just due to a weak 2024 wrap up. That's why that last bar chart looks so weak there, a bit of a dud, but not the case as we turn the page and look ahead to 2025. And again, it's not just MicroStrategy. I think it's worth noting that a lot of these other businesses out there, including publicly traded companies now, are looking at what MicroStrategy is doing and saying, we want to do that too. Also now adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets, maybe not the huge names as we saw with Microsoft and their shareholders rejecting the idea of adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet, but you add up a bunch of smaller companies and you might start to move the needle. And so again, as we always track it, we'll bring those headlines to you, but generally the setup there still bullish as we see more money coming in to Bitcoin writ large. But it's not just Bitcoin. I don't think I want to fall into that trap again in 2025 of only giving you Bitcoin news. Again, that's not what we're here to do at Coinage. We're here to look at everything that's happening in crypto and bring you the biggest headlines and the biggest projects to watch. And part of the thing that I like about it is that it's not just up to me. I'm not here shilling my own bags. I base my bags off of what our community also says is important to watch. And that's why we always do Crypto Project of the Year. And this is the important time of the year, folks, because now we are down. We took 16 top projects as nominated by everyone in our Discord. Again, if you want to join what we do here and influence what we talk about, what words come out of my mouth on this show, you go to Coinage.media, you mint an NFT, and you become a community member. But when we look at that bracket, Texas, we started with some really good projects. And if you really just wanted to buy any of these projects because our community says they're the ones to watch, you'd probably be fine doing that. But if you want to, I guess, stack more money on the projects that you think are better, then go watch our interviews and make a decision based off what you think are better. As we've narrowed this down, our final 4 was Solana, Base, Stacks, and Thorchain. And after voting that wrapped up today, we're now down to just Solana and Stacks. Very interesting because they're 2 very different projects in terms of narratives. You've got one of the leading Bitcoin layer 2s and Stacks, ways to unlock yields. I don't think I need to explain why they've landed in our final, because so much money flowing into Bitcoin ETFs, and as we highlighted with Commissioner Hester Peirce from the SEC just at year end, it seems like rules are about to loosen quite a bit. And if you got that much money just sitting there not earning yield, what you can do with it maybe if you can stack on stacks and start to unlock yield, it becomes a very interesting project if you look at it that way. And they just rolled out a lot of updates. So congrats to Stacks. You've landed our Crypto Project of the Year final. And on the Solana side, let's go ahead and dig into that, because as you see in the rundown, as we advance, there is a warning to be had when it comes to Solana. I don't know if it's worth digging too much into the headline at CoinDesk, which flags that, hey, look, there are some inflows in terms of Solana held on centralized exchanges, and that may be a warning. Because the last time we saw that, we saw Solana's price basically move lower / trade sideways for 7 months. And I want to just say that 2025 is going to be an interesting year, because you really do have to mix technical understanding of how these crypto projects work, what investors look at to say whether or not a project's moving in the right direction or not. And also, I think, as we learn in 24, some of the TradFi pieces that fall into place, including with the Bitcoin ETFs, it basically opened the floodgates for institutional capital to flow in. And so when we talk Solana, I can scroll down and show you exactly what the warning is here, which is just inflows and outflows on centralized exchanges. These numbers coming to us from CoinGlass. And you can look at those and say, okay, there might be a signal to put in my head there. But I do think it'd be a little bit of a red herring, because basically in 2025, the expectations are that you might get a Solana ETF. And if that happens, as we learned in 24, it opens the floodgates for a lot of money to flow into these things. And I just want to bring up right now what we're looking at in terms of odds on Polymarket. Let me go over there. It is interesting to look at how that has changed on Polymarket, because right now I think it's at 53%. The chances that we're assigning to that happening, which if you've watched this show and listened to Hester Peirce talk about it, you might say that seems low. But Solana ETF approved by July 31st, 2025, the summer, you've got a 53% chance. That was much higher. Now it's much lower. I don't know what moved that. I'd have to look into that. If you know, slap it in the comments here, help us out. But I would say that seems lower than I would expect. I would have expected us to be higher. So I got to look at what moved that market. Just because, based on everything we heard, it seems like it's a go. And also, when you put all that together and say, okay, Solana's sitting here at 220, basically flat, by the way, since we started Crypto Project of the Year and had on people from these communities to talk about why you should be bullish on them, there's a couple things I would say. I know this is the Solana warning section, but let me put this into context for you. Sui, one of the projects that I think I'm most bullish on, and again, we run a validator through our CoinEject partnership. If you have Sui, feel free to validate with us. Helps out the show, helps out you. I just did it last night, so I'm putting my money where my mouth is. They're up about 27% since we started this competition. And if you want to use that as a signal, lean into the winners who show the most strength. Sui looks like a good bet in 2025. However, on the other side, if you want to play, hey, look, which one of these projects hasn't really performed up to snuff for things that you might expect them to because they're good projects, Stacks is in our semifinal, and they got a great narrative, I think, to ride in 25. And if you back up and look at their performance over the last month, it ain't been so good, folks. They're down about 30%. And so there's two ways to look at this. You can lean into the winners who have shown strength over the last month and say, that's where I'm going to bet in 25, or you can lean into the losers who haven't really performed, Stacks being one of them, who've now managed to make it to our semifinal in Crypto Project of the Year as voted on by our members. And you might say, maybe I'll buy both of those and just play it, because the other ones, as we highlighted, Avalanche down 3%, basically flat. Akash down 2%, basically flat. Stacks, as I said, we just showed the chart, off 30. And then the other ones, somewhere in the middle. I mean, Bitcoin basically flat and Ethereum basically flat since we started this as well. So those are just kind of the proxies. So I'm just laying it out there. But I do want to highlight, Pantera came on and said it's altcoin season and time to pick some of these winners. So if you don't want to pick the winners I just highlighted, you can also just lean into Solana. Because again, I think Cosmo Zhang, one of the project or portfolio managers over at Pantera, a really smart guy, basically the leading traditional investor, I think, in crypto to listen to. Also a Coinage Network NFT holder, so shout out Cosmo. But here's what he told us just before the year ended, basically saying, look, if Solana gets the green light on the ETF front, that's where TradFi's interests are, because they're looking at the technical fundamentals, they're looking at activity on chain, And though it might be meme coins and shenanigans that's really happening on Solana, doesn't matter because it's proved that's where the attention is. Take a listen to what he told us why you should consider Solana in 25.
But if you look at something like a Solana, man, when we talk to the allocators that we talk to, whether it's any of the large bank wirehouses, without naming names, but there's only so many, it's very clear that like when we talk to them, they talk about how 95% of their conversations are about Bitcoin, but the next most talked about token is Solana, and ETH is a very distant third amongst TradFi people who don't own crypto, right? And so like that just speaks to like people are aware of what stuff is working, where the growth is, and people just want to buy assets that represent tokens that represent protocols that are growing and doing very well. And so, one in order to get excited about an asset class, like you really have to believe a couple of things. One is sort of the macro point of like capital flows coming in, and then two is really like back up even a little bit more. But you have to really care about three things. Usually you only have to care about two things, but in crypto, the third thing you actually have to care about is the legitimacy of the industry. One of the biggest no's that we get, or one of the first no that we receive for any institutional investor is like lack of regulatory clarity, throw up my hands, can't invest, buy. That bear case is now gone, right?
Yeah.
And so that is a major blocking point that is no longer with us. And that's like other asset classes never have to deal with. The other two that everyone has to deal with that are, to me, more important now that we can move past the regulatory piece is like, what is price versus fundamentals? Are fundamentals improving? And the macro point, which is like, are there good capital flows? On the capital flow front, it's exactly what you said, which is that the ETFs have helped a lot, but they've really only helped Bitcoin. And so getting these multi-asset ETFs, getting other ways to access Solana, all these other tokens, is very important. I think will be very helpful.
There it is. It is very helpful, I think, to look at all that. So anyways, I was just bringing this up because I think in the breakdown of everything to watch, it is really interesting to weigh out how Solana stacks up versus maybe some of the ETH L2s and the activity to watch. You heard there from Cosmo and the rest of Pantera basically that, look, the attention's on Solana. It's not so much on ETH Layer 2s. I would say technically because of our vote, it's hard to disagree. This is the way that things went in the semifinal for Solana versus Base, 90-45. So, the enthusiasm maybe just wasn't there for Base. And I think it makes sense. You don't have a token on Base. Maybe that changes. But as we've learned, sometimes you need a token to drive the community. I'm not saying coinage necessarily needs a token, but you watch all this stuff play out, and it does make you wonder. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say what we have planned in 25. I can't legally do that. But I do think it is pretty interesting to look at all this stuff. And shout out to our NFT holders for being here with us. I do want to say things are falling in place. So we've got Solana, we've got Stacks. Thank you for everyone who voted. Again, this is the way that we run the show. We listen to you guys. We'll see if Tolly wants to come back on. Hopefully he does. Thanks to Mert for coming on, by the way, in the earlier round. If you haven't watched the interviews, go watch all the interviews. They're all really good. They let you know what's happening in these ecosystems. And then you tell us. If you want to learn more, you heard something interesting, hey, what the hell was that all about? We'll dig into it. Otherwise, we're just going to go off of maybe what the bots are retweeting on Twitter, and maybe that's not the best way to go. However, good transition, Zach, into our next story, which is all about one of the ones that did make a coinage. I don't know if we can call coinage a household name at this point, but I'm going to say we are because of the way that we reported on Do Kwon's story. It's basically how we made our debut. Thank you to everyone for minting to watch back then in 22. And now here we are in 25. Finally, we're going to get the trial and all the information coming out now in the Do Kwon case and Terra collapse. If you haven't watched our episode yet on the Terra collapse and you're just playing catch up on that, I would highly suggest it. But over the weekend, as we saw Do Kwon making his first appearance in the U.S. In federal court, as he now faces 130 years. Not a typo. 130 years is what he's facing after extradition. And again, I don't think he's going to get anything near that. But that is the technical maximum sentence that exists for Do Kwon after that. And I think, if you haven't watched our episode yet, we've got that. But I just want to dig into a little bit of the details here because it is going to get interesting in terms of what prosecutors need to show. If you've already followed our coverage for the civil fraud trial that happened with the SEC, they already found Terra and Do Kwon liable for fraud. Now we're shifting into the criminal phase. Questions about whether or not he'd get extradited to South Korea or the U.S. He's here now. He's in New York. And we're going to be covering what happens next in that case on Wednesday when he's expected to appear in front of the judge. And they are going to set things for that trial. But overall, when you read the indictment as I did and we went through it, there are a couple things to highlight, including basically what happened post-collapse. Now, everything that we learned, we included in our mini doc, but there were other details that came out post that, and I just want to kind of mention some of those. I did in our thread, but we'll be covering it as, again, the details come out this week. But basically, there are a few different things to consider in terms of how prosecutors are going to explain why what Do did was criminal, and these are the main things to highlight. These are the 5 pieces of what they're going to show in court based off that 70-plus page indictment. And essentially, we covered a lot around the collapse. It was $40 billion that went poof. No questions were answered, so we went and we asked Do the questions that we could with the information we had at the time. But when you read the 70-plus page indictment, there's a lot more included in here that is beyond what we knew at the time, and they really are focusing on misrepresentations to investors. Again, kind of the same thing they highlighted in the SBF case, what they tried to show there in terms of fraud and falsifying certain things, stretching the truth. This, again, is kind of what we highlighted is where's the tipping point between failure and fraud? And it's clear that the case really highlights that, less so the actual collapse of Terra, more so what Do did around some of this stuff in terms of misrepresenting some of the risks to investors. Chai, we already saw in the SEC case, but really more to do with post-collapse things than the rest of everything. And so we'll be digging into that. Again, very serious ramifications for Do as we get into what happens in the courtroom. We'll be going there as we always do. It's in New York, just a few blocks away from where I sit right now. So we'll bring you the latest. If you're not following us already, follow Coinage, follow me at Zgoos on X. Follow us on YouTube as well. Subscribe, I should say. And if you want to, we also do a newsletter every week. We'll highlight all of this stuff as it happens for you. So if you don't want to miss anything, that's where we live. And it's important to stay abreast of all this. Huge ramifications, though, in that case, because I think, as we've highlighted, SBF and what happened with FTX is one thing. Moving funds around, taking customer money, spending it is one thing. Kind of easier for prosecutors to get a jury to understand. Algorithmic stablecoins, moving funds around, really murky in terms of criminal intent. And I think that's why the Do Kwon Terra case is a little bit more interesting than what happened at FTX, because it's not as clear cut and maybe more difficult for prosecutors to show criminal intent than it was for an SBF or everything that happened between FTX and Alameda. They'll have to do so with what Do Kwon did, and we will be covering that live from the courtroom as well. To wrap things up, I want to look ahead to what's happening this week on the macro calendar, because again, as we noted off the top of the show, things are constantly going to be quite volatile this week and into next, as we have Trump taking, well, his inauguration is January 20th, but really getting a clearer view of what's happening with his plans to come into office. But as we highlighted off the top of the show, these are the things to watch. Macro moves. This is the dollar index chart. And so this is what people were talking about when we had this huge move in the dollar and reporting on Trump's tariffs, and then bounce back as Trump said, don't believe the fake news. And so things like this are going to be happening, I think, all week. It's going to be important to watch more things coming out of the Trump group and trying to decipher what's real and what's not in terms of his plans. And then also on Friday, we get the big jobs number and unemployment update. Going to be a very interesting year. The market already reacted to a hawkish pivot to Fed Chair Jerome Powell and what he had to say at the last meeting. We're going to get FOMC minutes, so maybe some more clues into why the Fed said what they said and how the rest of the board of governors there at the Fed governors are thinking about what to do in 25 with all those rate cut decisions still looming large. And then, as I said, on Friday, we're going to get the jobs numbers and some consumer sentiment numbers, which aren't to be overlooked either. And so, new year, new us, new investing strategies, new everything, same sweater. But I think it's important to maybe take a look at some of these incoming data points, as we will do for you as we move through the week. So that's everything that's happening in crypto, folks. A lot of things to pay attention to as we turn the page and kick off a new year. Happy 2025, and thank you for joining us as we always do these Monday recap shows. Head to Coinish.media for the biggest headlines around Web3 and the world of crypto as we break them down for you from our community-owned outlet. You can join us and the co-founder of Netflix in co-owning Coinage. If you haven't yet, now is the time. It'll be my last warning to you to mint, to join what we're building here before prices increase this year. I'm going to thank you for tuning in as always. For everybody here at Coinage, thanks for watching. I'm Zach Guzman signing off. We'll see you again soon.